You walk into your own living room. Nothing's broken. Nothing's wrong. Exactly. But it just feels off. And you can't quite explain why. Here's the truth almost nobody tells you. That feeling isn't about taste. It isn't about money. And it definitely isn't about needing a professional designer. It's about the order you're making decisions in. Fix that order, and small changes can make an ordinary room feel completely different. Here's the first thing to understand. A beautiful home is rarely built by buying beautiful things one after another. In fact, that's one of the easiest ways to end up with a room that feels expensive, crowded, and strangely disconnected. So instead of starting with objects, start with a feeling. Do you want this room to feel calm, warm, energizing, sophisticated, relaxed? That answer matters, because every decision after it should support that one feeling. Think about the homes you remember most. It's probably not because you remember the brand of their coffee table. You remember how the room felt when you walked in. That feeling is your starting point. And here's the first rule that can instantly make a space feel better. Fix what you notice every single day before you worry about what looks impressive in photos. Maybe your sofa is angled wrong. Maybe the room is painfully bright at night. Maybe there's nowhere to put your keys when you walk in. Maybe your curtains stop halfway up the wall and quietly make the ceiling feel lower than it is. These sound like small problems, but you live inside them every single day. So stop asking, what would a designer buy for this room? Start asking, what is actually bothering me about this room right now? That question does more work than any shopping list ever will. Harsh lighting? Fix the lighting. Clutter? Fix the storage. Emptiness? Add texture. Everything feels disconnected? Start creating repetition. You don't need to transform the whole room. You need to remove whatever's making it feel wrong. And that brings us to something most people completely overlook. Lighting might matter more than almost anything you own. You can have a beautiful sofa, expensive art, carefully chosen furniture, and if the only light in the room is one bright fixture blasting straight down, the whole space can still feel cold. So instead, build layers. A floor lamp in one corner, a table lamp somewhere else. Let light come from different heights instead of forcing the whole room to lean on one source. Use natural light during the day. Soften everything at night. The goal isn't to make the room brighter. It's to make it feel intentional. And once that clicks, you start noticing something interesting. The cheapest changes are often the ones you feel the most. A lamp can change a room. A mirror can change how big it feels. Curtains can change the apparent height of your ceiling. A rug can visually connect furniture that used to look like a pile of separate objects. A plant can bring life to a room that's felt sterile for years. None of that requires tearing down a single wall. But here's a mistake that quietly makes homes feel unfinished: buying everything from the same place, at the same time, in the same style. It's technically coordinated, but it often ends up feeling less like a home and more like a showroom. Real homes have history. Things found unexpectedly, things inherited, things collected on a trip or bought because they made someone smile, or kept for years simply because they meant something. That's why a room with a few imperfect objects can feel far more interesting than one filled with matching furniture. You don't need everything to match, you need things to relate. Maybe a few objects share a similar color. Maybe the same material shows up in different corners of the room. Maybe rounded shapes repeat. Maybe warm wood appears in both the furniture and the small details around it. That's the trick. Repetition, not matching. Now here's where this gets even more freeing. You don't have to know your style before you start. That single idea causes most of the hesitation people feel. They spend weeks asking, am I modern? Minimalist? Scandinavian? Traditional? Industrial? But your home doesn't need to fit neatly into a category. Your taste is allowed to evolve. Honestly, it probably should. So instead of choosing a label, start paying attention to what keeps catching your eye. Save photos of rooms you're drawn to, but don't just save the whole room. Ask yourself what actually caught your attention. Was it the warm lighting, the oversized artwork, the natural materials, the empty space, the dark walls, the mix of old and new? Collect enough of these, and a pattern starts to appear. That pattern is far more useful than any style label could ever be. And if you're worried about making an expensive mistake, here's the fix. Make your experiments reversible. Before you commit to something big, test it first. Move the furniture around, borrow something, buy secondhand, use removable hooks, try a paint sample before covering an entire wall. Live with a piece for a few days before deciding it belongs. That one shift changes everything psychologically. Instead of thinking, I have to get this right, you start thinking, I'm just testing an idea. And that distinction is huge, because perfection creates hesitation, but experimentation creates progress. This is especially true with furniture. You don't need to start with a big investment. Secondhand shops, vintage stores, and local markets are incredible places to experiment with shape, material, and scale, without committing your whole budget. Wondering if a big armchair would actually work in your space? Don't buy a brand new one to find out. Find a used one. Live with it. If it works, you've learned something real about your room. If it doesn't, you move it along and try again. Your home becomes a laboratory, not a final exam, and that alone removes an enormous amount of pressure. But there's one more principle that can make almost any room feel more sophisticated, and it's the opposite of what most people do. When a room feels boring, the instinct is to add something. Another cushion, another shelf, another decoration. But sometimes, the room doesn't need more. It needs less. Look around and find the things that aren't serving a purpose, aren't creating beauty, and don't hold any real meaning. Those are your first candidates to remove. Negative space isn't wasted space. It gives the things that matter room to actually be seen. A great piece of art looks more powerful when it isn't fighting 12 other objects for attention. A great sofa looks better when it isn't jammed between furniture it doesn't need. And a small room can genuinely feel bigger the moment you stop trying to fill every corner. The same rule applies to color. You don't need 10 different colors to make a room interesting. Pick a simple foundation, then repeat a few accents through the space. Warm neutrals as your base, with a muted green showing up in a plant, a cushion, and a piece of art. Suddenly, 3 unrelated objects start speaking the same visual language. That's the real secret. Not more stuff, more connection. So if you're wondering where to start tomorrow, don't open a shopping app. Walk through your home slowly. Pick one room, stand in the doorway, and look at it like you've never seen it before. What does your eye land on first? Does it deserve that attention? What feels uncomfortable? What feels empty? What feels cold? Then fix exactly one thing, not 5 things, not the entire room, just one. Start with whatever is bothering you the most. If the sofa feels awkwardly placed and makes the room difficult to move through, move it. Try turning it slightly toward the natural focal point, or pull it away from the wall and see how the room suddenly begins to breathe. If the lighting feels harsh, don't replace every light fixture. Change one lamp, move it to a darker corner, add a warmer bulb, and notice how the atmosphere changes after sunset. If the room feels cluttered, don't spend the weekend reorganizing everything. Remove 3 objects that aren't serving a purpose, creating beauty, or holding any meaning. Then stop. Maybe the room feels lifeless. Add one plant and give it a place where you can actually see it. Maybe the artwork feels strangely disconnected. Hang it a little lower and see how it changes the relationship between the walls and furniture. Or perhaps everything feels scattered. Bring in a simple rug that visually connects the main pieces. The important part isn't which change you make. It's that you make one change, then stop. Live with it for a few days. Notice how the room feels when you walk in. Sit down, relax, and move through it. Because you're not trying to finish your home. You're learning what your home actually needs. Live with it. See how it feels. Because the goal was never to finish your home in a weekend. The goal is to slowly build a space that feels more and more like you. And maybe that's the real lesson here. A great home isn't the one that looks perfect. It's the one where your shoulders drop the moment you walk through the door, where the lighting feels right at night, where the objects around you quietly remind you of people, places, and moments you love. So don't wait for a bigger budget. And don't wait until you're completely sure about your taste. Start with one problem. Make one small change. Then watch what happens. Because the home you've been trying to create might not be hiding behind some big renovation or an expensive shopping list. It might already be there, underneath the clutter, the bad lighting, and the fear of getting it wrong. If this changed how you see your own space, hit like so I know you want more of these. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what's the one thing in your home you'd change first?